Yeah.
Yeah, let's dive right in. So today, guys, I wish I could claim credit for the tagline, but sawdust to scale. We're going to talk about growing your business and all that entails. And truthfully, I'm kind of curious how that's going to meander and go. I imagine it was a non-linear path.
It was definitely not a linear path.
Before we even start, I'm dying to know why, what even made you want to look at this business, to get into it? What drew you in?
We were buying wood from the industry and we were making products from it. And we got to a point where John and I were offered, I'm pretty sure it was a cherry tree from that old man out there off of near Steve-O.
That's how most businesses.
Yeah.
Cherry tree.
It was an old cherry tree.
Yeah.
And it was like, what are we gonna do with this? And we had met a Sawyer.
What's his name?
Yeah, God, that drunk guy.
Yeah.
Anyway, and
Sound business. Got it.
we drove the log to his facility.
Blew out a tire on the way, and we stopped at Waffle House.
Yeah, and we said, that's the Waffle House we went to.
Excellent. Well,
Yeah.
there's continuity.
Yeah, there is.
Grease and Wheels of Commerce.
Yeah.
That's where that one came from.
Yes, exactly. Anyway, so we started with that, and it was just, we knew that a log could become lumber, but we had zero understanding of how that actually occurred. In fact, the term Sawyer, I don't even think was in our vocabulary at the time. And it was fun to discover what was in the log. I mean, that was what you and I were drawn to, I think.
I liked it. Yeah, it was cool to open it up and see, like, wow, like I never knew that logs looked like that inside. Look at a tree, and you're like, oh, that's kind of it's a tree. You know what boards look like, but it always been pine. I didn't like hardwoods were a completely new thing to me, coming from a construction background.
But I'm curious with that because that makes sense, curiosity, but what makes you then see a business in that? What makes you see something, not just out of that interest to learn and the curiosity, but where do you get to a point where you say, hey, there's something here that I think has value, that I think there's something that I can build something like a business on top of?
That's a loaded question.
Yeah, I'm like,
Did you think that first?
No,
off? Okay.
no. I'm like, what we did think is that if you looked at our numbers, which we kept simple books in QuickBooks,
This is the original construction.
this is the original construction business and into the wood shop, is we got to a point where we saw that our biggest dollar amount spent per year was in buying material from the lumber industry. It was like the biggest number on the spreadsheet. And then the idea that this guy was going to give us a free log, and we're like, oh, our time's free. Let's drive it up to this guy and go through this effort. It was very much a big number on a page, and then curiosity and excitement. It's the best way I think I can explain it, at least.
Yeah, I think there's a couple of steps missing in there, but I don't think we need to get into the details too much. But this goes back to like 2008, 2009 when the industry tanked, the real estate industry. We were building houses at the time, so we got stuck with a house that we couldn't finish. Remember?
Oh yeah.
So the one house, we're like, we got some tools, we got a little bit of knowledge. I read an article on Fine Home Building. I'm like, let's try this, because we couldn't find anybody to do what we wanted to do affordable. So we ended up building all the doors, the interior doors. We built the countertops for it. We built the
Stair
front door,
treads.
the back door, the stair treads, all of it, because we couldn't find anybody to do it the way that we wanted it done cheaply enough. And then we discovered that there was a void in the market there. So that kind of what's got us into the woodworking world from the construction industry. That was the transition point, I think, for me. So then going down that path, then you start reading the articles, you start looking at, you can build countertops out of this stuff. You can build like everything you touch is wood. Like your dining room table is wood, everything. And you're like, wow, well, okay, so where does this come from? You start doing the research, get curious, then that's where it all kind of snowballs into this.
But what's interesting looking back at the experience that you guys are having and kind of thinking about where your business ended up going and where everybody's business hopefully ends up going, is that you saw the value in the supply chain. You saw that as you looked up from your current business, hey, there's more value upstream. I can get involved further up the stream and make a bigger impact.
It's simple math too.
It's simple math, but it's also an opportunity to control more of that destiny of the end product that you were used to working with.
You control the quality of what you're getting to.
Exactly.
Yes.
I would love to sit here and say I even knew the word supply chain when I made that decision.
We didn't know, but we talked about it.
We-
All
we
the logs
did.
going up
Why I
the
said
street.
retrospective.
Yeah, okay, just to be very clear.
You can appreciate it now,
Yeah, totally, absolutely.
but it was instinct then.
It was instinct, but it was very much led by curiosity for me. Like so much of it was just like, that's neat. I want to do that. I don't want to go fishing on the weekends. I thought the idea of milling a log was fun. Just to be clear, like from my perspective, there was very much a money decision there, but it totally for me started from, I want to know what's in there.
Yeah, what does it look like?
So I'm dying to know, what was the first mill? What was the first cut? How did you jump from taking a log to somebody to actually doing it yourself?
Craigslist.
Yeah, it really started on Craigslist.
Craigslist. You bought a mill on Craigslist.
Yeah, I bought a mill on Craigslist from a guy that I wound up meeting through somebody else, even though I found him on Craigslist originally. He had milled a tree for us. It was actually the English walnut tree that we made our first table out of.
Mhm.
He had salvaged an English walnut tree out of an alley in Philly. And I went to go look at the sawmill and he had the remaining parts of that English walnut tree in his barn. And I was like, you're telling me that the slabs that we bought 2 years ago were milled on this mill? And it was like, yeah, that's the rest of the tree.
You had the log. Get the rest-
Yeah,
the rest of the- well, this is-
You know, he had the rest of the boards milled.
Oh, just the rest
So
of the
we only
slabs.
had bought 2 slabs from a retailer
Got it,
who
got it.
had bought it from this guy, who I then found on Craigslist. And I struck a deal where I bought the mill and the remaining boards of that tree from him for one price.
Got it.
And that was our first sawmill. And it was an all manual Norwood sawmill that had a very tiny throat and it came with a bundle of blades. And it felt like you put this thing on some bunks and you can just start milling.
It worked great, right?
Oh,
Not at all.
it was so cold.
I don't even think, to be honest, did you even completely mill a log on it?
I think
Or
we,
did you
yeah,
give
no,
up?
I milled a couple because I remember Ron pulling his Land Rover up, rolling his window down when we were at the farm. But first he's like, what in the hell are you doing? Standing out in the middle of a field in January, snow everywhere, trying to push the sawmill through with a bunch of logs.
Yeah, it was
horrible.
It was awful. Not like the experience of working with a true sawyer at all.
But I'm assuming that it was enough to get hungry and keep going.
Yes, of course.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah.
Because it was cool.
It was the obvious answer was to go way bigger in every way. That was the answer. It was like, this doesn't work. Let's go as big as we can with us all.
Clearly the problem is that I haven't spent enough money right now.
Yes, exactly.
And
Yep.
I
exactly.
doubled down. I'm assuming the first mill was,
I want to hear you guess
Mill?
this. I want to hear you guess this.
I don't know, I'm pretty sure Amazon doesn't sell sawmills, so.
Probably.
They might by now.
You
Yeah.
know,
We
that's,
bought a joiner on Amazon.
Yeah.
but,
Amazon Prime.
to get those Prime Day
They
discounts.
delivered the next day.
Yeah.
But with that mill, I'm assuming you guys are just trying to find something to support, just trying to find that first mill to experiment with.
Yeah, we had no money. The wood we bought plus the mill was $5,500. And it was like, that's what we had left over sitting in a drawer of like, well, we can use this on a rainy day. Let's try this.
But I imagine that's not an uncommon experience for somebody getting into this space. Buying a used mill,
Probably not at all.
borrowing time on somebody else's mill, trying to get hands on. What did you learn? Obviously, you want to jump up and start going to the next level, but what on that sort of first go around? Were you guys key takeaways?
Insides of logs are cool.
Fact.
It's true.
Yeah.
Like
fact.
you take something that you think is gonna be trash, and you cut it open, you're like, that is really good looking. Like, that's crazy. I'd never expected that.
Yeah.
And that you can actually turn it into a viable product at the end, and that was kind of interesting, and like, we did it from the beginning all the way to the end. That was neat for me.
The wow factor was that.
Yeah.
It was also, I do remember, and even this conversation just kind of hit me, is that I remember going back to that. We were spending 150 grand a year in buying industry wood. And I just kept
As a
going
construction company.
the beginnings of the woodworking shop.
Yeah,
We were buying $150,000 of walnut every year. And I was just like, we just spent $5,500 and there's things in the way that's not making this happen easily. But if we do the math,
Yeah.
because we can do math apparently, we would go out and we can afford a much more expensive mill that has all of these features on it that should make this job easier. Because that first mill taught us that It is a lot of labor, because there was no hydraulics, there was,
Everything was
everything was manual.
Everything.
You guys jumped directly, because what I've seen with a lot of shops that we've talked to before, it seems to be sort of a split from those folks that are using the sort of the chainsaw rigs that will sort of,
Alaska Mills, yeah.
thank you, that will use that approach as a first time start, obviously a lot more cost effective start, probably gets completely different results than you would expect from more of a rig. You guys jump straight to a rig. Advice for new shops that are actually at that point in the journey or trying to get into this business, what would you advise them? Would better to start small and build their way up, better to go right to something that's pro grade and not waste time
That's a
learning?
good question.
And I really, honestly, both of you guys, I'd love to hear your thoughts, sort of
Yeah.
the process, because clearly, if you can only count the number of successful logs in that first mill on one hand, that
Yeah.
more learning than doing. So how do people sidestep that?
For me, it was the idea of actually working with someone who has a sawmill and being a helper and experiencing what that is like in its fullest amount.
So really shadowing someone else.
Yep.
Someone that knows
And just
before they do anything.
before, like literally before they do anything.
That's a really good point.
Yeah, is to shadow someone. And the reason I say that, I'm not trying to jump ahead on the question and conversation here,
At
but
all.
once we landed on the mill that really put us on the map to be able to really turn a profit or to begin to scale, was to get the same mill in terms of capacity and ability as the guy we watched and that we shadowed.
That makes
And
sense.
once we got that mill, it started clicking for
Yeah,
us.
everything changed.
Because we shadowed a guy that had a very large mill. And our first successful mill, I'll call it, was a large mill.
The one that he had, you guys got and basically learned from that experience. Said, we're just gonna do what we've seen,
You got a similar size.
do what we're
Yeah.
experiencing. Yeah, not identical necessarily, but again, not. So if I'm paraphrasing a little bit, sounds like the real value is going from the experience, not necessarily trying to walk up some
Correct.
cost ladder or something like that. Now, obviously, cost is always a function. Would you say that the sawmill is the right first step? Obviously, you're gonna mill the logs, but would it be better to work with that other individual for a little bit, or? is it
Looking
better
back on it, yeah.
To rent time, would you prefer to rent time on a mill, something like that? Would you jump right into your own mill? each
Knowing
time?
what I know now, I would have spent a lot more time shadowing him and learn all the little intricacies. As opposed to trashing all the logs that I trashed when I first started, not knowing the proper techniques to do it.
Yep.
Because we wasted a lot of material, just even aligning a log the right way. It never crossed my mind, never thought about it, something I never had to think about. And I never got that information from him, probably because he was keeping it close to his chest and wasn't divulging that information. But at the same time, I didn't know enough to ask.
Yeah,
So I would say
no, that's fair.
that's a really good
Yeah.
starting point is education.
So early career Sawyer, what are the top 3 questions you'd ask?
No,
Somebody's watching you, what would you want them to ask you?
why are you doing it the way that you're doing?
Well, that's a cheat. I don't accept that. That's a cheat. That covers all questions. I want real ones.
Man, that's a hard question to answer. What are you looking for? What are you looking at? Like, what do you see when you look at this law?
Yeah.
And what do you see the potential out of it? What are you trying to get out of it? Like,
That's the question.
what is it that you're looking at? What do you see in this crazy thing that's laying on your sawmill? What do you see that you're gonna get out of it?
I'm not gonna lie, I find that fascinating. Mainly because that's very much, first off, pretty hard to teach. Other than just observing
Experience.
and
yeah.
learning and having experience, but also not necessarily technical. And it goes back to your point about the apprenticeship and the working with and really watching a pro do it. Got a lot of value.
For sure.
The one thing I'll throw into that, because I mean, John's very right what he's saying, but the experience that we went through to mill everything and to just try everything was what a lot of the industry doesn't do. And because we're working with fallen material, the results that we were receiving aren't written in a book and aren't discussed elsewhere. So A, we were learning the process in general, but B, we were also proving how you could also manipulate wood that is
Experiment.
that's trashed.
Yeah.
In a way in which we were then able to see results and understand, well, wait a minute, the industry tells you to do it this way, but we have all this material that sits over here. How much of the normal way versus how much of just trial and error and experimenting gets you to a point in which we actually learned a lot from that.
You did.
And we learned a lot that you would not capture from following the industry standard. That is viable product we sell today, to be clear.
What's the best way to go through that process? 'Cause I agree, it makes legitimate sense that,
Find somebody willing to teach
well, I mean, even with
Obviously.
that, I mean. the
One beer at a time. This is a hold my beer moment and you just get into it.
What is that? Fear, sweat, and tears?
Yeah, exactly.
Is that the
I'm like,
approach?
cause I'm like, in the end, it is a hold my beer moment for him and I, it was. And then it was, we were killing ourselves to make it happen because we didn't have the money to buy the hydraulics. And then the tears came was when, after we went through all that effort, we actually wound up trashing a lot of really good material because we didn't know how to do all the things that you need to know to
Didn't know any
get a
better.
good outcome.
But it's valuable sort of lesson learned, going back and seeing yourself back then and giving yourself advice. I think experimentation is obviously critical to go through,
Of course.
but advising folks, what's the best way to experiment? How do you, what's a
Start
good tip?
milling cheap logs.
Cheap logs,
Cheap logs.
but honestly,
Not the good ones.
would you say that, again, you're learning more from conventional, you're learning more from slabs? Is it more about species variance? Is it about testing different sort of seasoning times? What would you say is
All of those are true.
all the above?
Every single one of those is
Yeah,
true.
all the above, yeah. And the learning hasn't ended. I'm like, we can mill a log and dry it in 7 days. And we're still learning 8-10 years later. Like every time another board comes out of the machine or comes to the mill, we're still like, the heck went wrong there?
What happened there?
And it's like the yield wasn't what we wanted, or the look of the material wasn't what it should have been based on what we learned on the previous 10 years. And we're just constantly changing that the outcome by paying attention and really being fully engaged in the results.
Why are you laughing?
Because, no, it's just, as somebody that's not in this industry, I just find how it's so interesting how it really comes back to a lot of endeavors like this, where you're really trying to build a deep skill set. So much of it is experimentation. So much of it is just getting hands-on, watching people that know how to do it, getting access to information. It's just a critical piece of the whole learning process.
The big change for me came, we hired a guy who was a sawyer to help me out at the sawmill part-time. And
This was early on.
no, not necessarily early on.
Like
It's
halfway
in the
through the
middle.
journey?
Halfway through? Okay.
Yeah. And he, in the first week he was there, taught me more than I learned.
Really?
Yes, shadowing the guy that we shadowed and doing it by myself for as long as I did. And even reading the books, magazines, YouTube videos, all of it. Simply the first week he was there. And it changed the quality of the material that we kick out on the other side of that mill. 100%. For the better.
Just fun again. What's the best thing that you picked up from him?
Lining up the pith
Ah, interesting.
To get good.
to get
quarter-
good quality. Yeah.
to get
Seems
quarter
simple,
saw.
but-
It seems simple, never thought about it.
Why-
Wanted to maximize the yield of the log. I didn't really necessarily care about the quality so much of that. It wasn't at the forefront of my mind.
Yeah,
So learning and understanding that, oh shit, put these things on the same measurement of each end, and I cut it straight. It changes the whole game.
what kind of output when you're obviously you guys flow through when you're on the sales side, what does that look like when that kind of change comes across? Do you see it? Is it material on the output?
That's actually a really interesting point that I'm gonna make a big deal out of right now.
Yes.
And
big
that
deal.
is, the moment him and I realized that something has to change, it took a solid effing year to notice
see
that
the
result.
Really?
And it wasn't because we only mill one log a year. It was because you're milling.
Take a really long
Yeah,
time.
we're 190 years old. No, it is because when you're into producing your inventory, you're about a year in front of what you're gonna need, because a lot of the material we were milling is walnut and white oak. And we were milling 8, 10, 12 quarter. And that material needs to air dry for a certain amount of time.
You don't see the results for a long
So you don't see the results for a minimum of 1 year. So it was painful to come to this realization and then say, all right, let's go make all these changes. And then for 9 months to a year, I'm selling something that I know is going to get better. And that also taught us a lot from a fabrication perspective, which is a completely separate episode. But you learn a whole lot about how long it takes to truly appreciate like what you're really bringing to market.
But I think that's true. Obviously, it's true of the industry. It's not necessarily unique to you guys. how, in the spirit of sort of getting a business off the ground, learning, growing, having that sort of pipeline, which everybody will be subjected to, how do you grow your business and manage that? How do you manage that reality that it's a really slow moving set of changes? What did you guys do? What didn't you do? What did you do after you realized that you did the wrong thing?
Well, we got creative. I mean, the honest answer is we got creative. We found a use for the material no matter what the result was. And that was
It's interesting.
where you go down the path of fabrication to figure out where's there a market for this. And we need to utilize all of this effort as best we can.
You're forced to, it's economics.
We also trashed a bunch. Like we said that a little while ago. It's like we knew we got to a point where like we can't sell this to our customer. Because our customer, before we bought our sawmill, was buying products from us where we were buying FAS premium grade material from the industry. So like we had to quickly bring our quality up to the highest level as fast as humanly possible. And it was coming from a fallen source. So we were already, a couple steps behind from the source of the log in terms of what you get within it, not to mention the experience to provide it.
That's an interesting question, where you guys were so early to sort of see and identify, as a lot of the people in our unique space within the industry, to see the value of that salvage material versus the industry wood that you were buying. Was it a home run right away? You just knew like this was it? Or did that process take a time to really fix it, play out? I mean, obviously it's all up into the quality of your handling of the material. That's a beautiful tree regardless. It's how you can get it to where it needs to be, is the key piece. Did you guys sense that right from the start?
That's a tough question.
I don't
man.
think so.
I don't think we're smart enough to know that.
Yeah, I don't think we realize it now. I'm like, I mean,
You sure have a lot of it.
well, the thing is, well, that's actually, and this is go back to curiosity for John and I both. Like, we love to figure out why for everything. And we love the challenge and we love the effort. So it's like going down these paths was critical in terms of like keeping us engaged. Yeah. Because it's just engaged as business partners and engaged in the actual activity of what we were doing.
Yeah,
for sure.
So we've talked a lot about milling, and I think that's a really key step, obviously, in getting into all of this, and really, that's the first step. You get that first mill, you get that first log, and you jump into it. Obviously, there's other process steps associated with it. I have my guess that what is probably the next biggest challenge and experience in that journey. But I'm curious, what was the next thing where you went, oh man, I'm starting from zero?
Oh my God.
Trying.
Yeah.
Well, yeah. I'm like trying
We
storage.
talked about kilns, so I know that.
Yeah,
That was my guess.
Yeah.
It all honestly happens kind of at once. I think the first thing was, where are we storing all of this wet wood?
How are we gonna sell it?
Yeah, and then it was, how are we gonna sell all this wet wood? And then once you had just a little bit more wet wood is, how are we gonna move all of this wet wood? Because we were moving it by hand. It was like, oh, we need handling equipment. We need space. Wait, our kiln can't be plugged in here because it doesn't have three-phase power and we need three-phase power to run a kiln. It was every problem you could ever possibly imagine.
So essentially, you produce, as the wood's moving forward, you're just trying to chase it. First you get the log, then you cut it. Now what do I do with this piece? I gotta build stuff around it. And then it's in the next phase, you're gonna build around that.
And that just keeps going, man. That's still going.
That's the joys of fallen lumber. That's the difference between harvested and fallen.
What is the difference?
Harvested, you're going out and you're planning on taking that tree down and make 100 board feet of lumber. Fallen, it's the chase. And that's what him and I loved.
Finding crazy trees.
Yeah, finding the crazy tree, figuring out how to use a sawmill, figuring out where to store it, figuring out how to move it quickly, figuring out how to dry it, figuring out how to pay the bill. I'm like, it was the chase. It was so much of the effort.
But at the end of the day, it's a business. So how do you guys, as you're doing that?
That's priority number 2. That doesn't matter as much.
It's a clubhouse. It's a clubhouse.
Yeah, it doesn't. In all honesty, and honestly, John, this is no joke. We used to say this all the time to our employees and people we work with. Is like having fun, which was for us being curious, was priority number 1, and that led us down a really cool road. And we grew up to a point where we were like, priority number 2 needs to be making money.
Yeah.
But it's always kind of stayed that priority number 1 is having fun and being fully engaged with what you're doing.
Seems like priority number 1 sets number 2 though. It seems like if you guys are in this space when you've got customers that are drawn to a material that's not stock, that's not it's not everywhere, and quite frankly, not really important, like some of this material can be.
Yeah.
Really, all this material can be in a broader sense. It must have made a difference immediately with customers.
The
When you're able to
story,
bring
yeah.
the story, but also just the
did.
quality, to say that this wasn't something I just bought and made you a table out of it. Like, I've seen this, truly, I've seen this from its beginnings, and it's here, and it's in, even if the broader story around the large impacts that we have don't resonate, the craftsmanship must.
Yeah. And we luckily had that in our back pocket from before we got our sawmill. That craftsmanship part of it, and that's actually probably what drove us next to curiosity to achieve the best possible outcome for Vaughn. Was that we worked with nothing but the most premium material on the planet. And it was like every time we milled a board, dried it, produced it into something, our goal was to make it as good, if not better, than what you could go out and buy easily like that. Like, I don't want to make it sound that simple, but like every single board we pulled out of the kiln, every single board off the mill, it was like, I think after the last load that we just put out of the kiln, a knot like that's gonna crack, and that board's only 6 feet long. Why are we drying 8 feet if we're only getting a 6-foot board out of it? And it's like staring at a sawmill in a field in the sun. Well, I gotta turn on the chainsaw, and we gotta do this, and we gotta do that, and it's like, it led us to getting to a point where the quality of our product meant so much, because we had to match what we would already have built on the other side.
And truthfully, at this point, you're so invested
Oh my
in the
God.
entire journey.
There we are.
I've seen you on that mill.
Yeah,
Don't lie to me.
the amount of conversations that we had about spending money over the years. Oh my God.
That's where the tears go.
Oh yeah. It was like, no.
Before or after beers.
Both.
And that's-
Well, no, I would get the beers and then we'd start drinking and then it was like, we need another $100,000. And it was just always like, that's another $100,000. And it's like, well, yeah, if you're gonna play ball, you need to have that.
How does the new operation tackle that? Obviously, that's not,
It's very much a walk, crawl, run, or a crawl, walk, run mentality.
Yeah.
It is not, it is almost like an earned process.
okay.
There's
makes sense.
a lot to learn along the way, but the journey is fun. And to be honest with you, if you don't find a journey fun, then the other side, which truly doesn't ever end, because once you have the wood bug, you don't let go of it, in my opinion, then it's not meant for you. The journey is a part of the success, in my opinion,
That makes a lot of
because
sense.
it's a labor of love. It truly
We're
is.
still here. How many
Yeah.
years later?
Well, 23, yeah.
Well, I know we are close to our sort of normal time, but I'd like to wrap with a question. And I will do you guys a favor of asking and then talking for a few more minutes so you can think about it. But I really want to understand, again, looking at your whole careers, this whole journey, we touched on a big part of the milling. So I really think that's the entrance for a lot of people that want to get into this business. If you could go back, go through that process again, I like to believe that you do it. I'm not going to ask you that question, but what is the one thing you wish you could go back and tell yourself, whether it be start at a different point, pay attention to this, take a different approach? What would that be? Or
I already answered that.
the whole process though. Whole process. What would you do if you look at this business again and you guys are looking at that Craigslist mill somewhere between beers and tears and wondering if you're gonna buy it and switch this business and get into this whole industry? What is the one thing you tell yourself? And it might just be, go for it. Because it's gonna be awesome.
It's been a hell of a ride. I don't know how to answer.
Honestly, I wouldn't change a thing but buy more beer. I'm like, there's honestly nothing I would change, because every decision we made, it was made from curiosity, being able to prove it and staying profitable and successful along every step of the way. And it was like, without learning the hard lessons, we wouldn't be able to put out a board that we're that proud of.
Yeah, I
No,
wouldn't change. I
honestly.
mean, I wouldn't change anything either. That's where we are. So I would have paid
Actually,
more attention.
No, I take that back, and you'll agree with this, I bet. If we could have found a way to put our sawmill closer to. our facility,
God. Yeah.
That
We
we would
talked
tell
about that
ourselves,
last
that
time,
we would
didn't
tell
we?
ourselves.
Yeah.
Because right now, for everyone that's listening, our sawmill operation is 45 minutes from here, separated by a beltway. which will slowly wear away your soul. And I highly recommend putting your drying and your fabrication as close as you can to your sawmill.
Yeah, preferably on the same plot,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah,
Saves a lot of time. And money.
that has been, that I would change. But beer and keeping it the way it is, I'd still stick with that.
So don't drive across the major American city to
Yes.
to execute your business.
Yep.
And buy some beer,
Buy more beer,
buy more beer,
Yep.
'cause you obviously need to have some to start.
absolutely.
To go with the sweat and tears. And what I'm really taking away from all of this is it's do it.
Yeah.
Just do it. Get into it,
Yeah.
take the journey.
Do it.
And the learning part of it. And what I really like about what you guys are doing and what I see a lot in the industry is that people are starting to invest in that in the community. They're saying, this is awesome what we're doing. This
Absolutely.
is amazing. Let's share this knowledge like you guys are. Let's get together. This is an amazing thing that's happening. And that a lot of people are working really, really hard. A lot of people in this call are working really, really hard to bring to the world. And I think that's really cool. So to me, the fact that you guys are just like, I would just do it again and just jump in again and again and again after a decade plus of doing this.
Right.
Yeah.
That's a pretty special thing.
In fact, I would tell everyone who's listening, lean into your story. Because the more we lean into ours, the more the public and society enjoyed it. And because people have become disconnected from what it means to do this. And the more I was able to explain it, the more we were able to show it with pictures, with videos, with tours, the more people's eyes light up and they realize it. So it's the labor of love is worth it. You just need to show the people in the right way. That's what I would leave with for sure.
Awesome. Well, I appreciate everybody for joining. And Sophia, do we do questions? We are right. We've got nothing else coming in from the other side. So thank you, Mutt. Thank you everybody for joining. Thank you, John. Great seeing you.
And whoever else is out there.
And whoever else is on the call. I just know I talked to John when we first started. And again, thanks for joining us, guys. Really appreciate it. And have a great one.
Take care, everyone. See you later.
Bye.